Hey everyone, this is Chad from thelastpassage.net. Thanks for joining me today. Today I want to share with you my top 5 favorite books of all time. It's been hard, it's been difficult to put this list together, but I felt like it was a good way to start off my video series for the blog. The first book on my list is a pretty well-known book at this point. It is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And I think I chose The Hunger Games out of the trilogy just to be representative of the trilogy. Probably, if we were realistic, Catching Fire would probably be my favorite book out of the trilogy. But I love The Hunger Games so much. I've read it several times and I just think that it's a great story. For those of you who don't know, The Hunger Games is in this land called Panem, which is divided into the capital in 12 districts. And we have our heroine who comes into play, Katniss Everdeen. Every year, to kind of keep the peace, so to speak, the capital requires all districts to submit 2 tributes to what's called the Hunger Games, which is some like televised version of a bloodbath, essentially. The tributes go into this highly designed arena, and they are forced to kill each other, and whoever is the last person standing is the winner of the Hunger Games. What I love so much about this book is that we have such a strong narrator in Katniss Everdeen. I think the interesting thing too about the novel is, while they always say may the odds be ever in your favor, well clearly they're not, right? This novel is all about being against the odds, because the odds are against you. And I think that is just a really interesting thing to think about. And maybe that's why this makes so much sense as a YA novel, because as a teenager, maybe you feel like the world is against you. One of my favorite passages of the novel is a quote that says, "Destroying things is much easier than making them." And I think that that's something really important to remember. I think maybe it's important to also think about, do we want to put in the effort to actually make things rather than destroying them? All right, so let's move on to book 4. Thinking about this next novel, man, I was just completely blown away when I first read this novel, and it's The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, who, first off, let's all be honest, is a master writer. I mean, hands down, he has to be one of the best writers in the world, period. So what we have in this novel is the story about this middle-aged man who goes back to his childhood home, which actually is no longer there, but on the kind of in the countryside of England. While he's there, he starts remembering some period of time where he, as a child, had this experience that for some reason hasn't stuck with him as a memory. So as he's there, he remembers hanging out with this girl, Letty, and her showing him this pond, which was at the end of the lane, but she claimed that it was an ocean. And of course, there's plenty of other magical themes about the story as well. I want to share probably my favorite scene in the whole book, and it's super short, but it kind of immediately made me think, oh man, I'm dealing with a really big story right here, even though it's in this like really small package. So this quote, or this passage, is actually on page 30 of this edition. And it goes, "She shrugged. Once you've been around for a bit, you get to know stuff. I kicked a stone. By a bit, do you mean a really long time?" She nodded. "How old are you really?" I asked. 11. I thought for a bit. Then I asked, "How long have you been 11 for?" She smiled at me. Man, I mean, that's one of the beauties of fantasy writing. You have just this mystery that is always veiled around you. This girl is clearly appearing as 11, but she's not 11, right? She's not just wise beyond her years. I think she might actually be beyond her years. And that's so awesome, right? And it's just amazing that you have pieces of world building like that that just make the story so rich. I can't help but absolutely recommend this book. It really shows kind of this power of memory. Why is our narrator missing this piece of his memory? I think you'll find out a little bit towards the end. But it also shows kind of this fragility of magic as well. So I think that oftentimes we think about magic in the sense of being all-powerful. And that's not magic, right? Magic is some type of force, some type of ability, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be triumphant or anything like that. And I think that this shows that even sometimes through the power of sacrifice, how fragile magic actually is. So anyway, really cool, absolutely recommend it. And it is a book that I think about often and I have loved reading over and over again. Book 3. This was really hard for me because I debated about whether this was actually book 3 or if it was really book 2. And when it came down to it, I had to make it book 3. And book 3 is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I love apocalypse stories. Notice I didn't say post-apocalyptic. Notice I didn't say dystopian. I mean actual apocalyptic stories where the world is ending. Don't get me wrong. I think that what happens after the apocalypse, or what happens when a new regime is set up post-apocalypse, I think that that's really interesting. But I am very fascinated about the build-up, the tension, and the climax of the world actually ending. And Justin Cronin does just an amazing job in The Passage of doing that. And he also does a great job post-apocalypse as well. So The Passage is all about this virus that transforms these people into essentially these vampire-like monsters. So rather than zombies, they're vampires. And not vampires in the sense of like Dracula, vampires in like I will rip you to shreds monster. And the virus, of course, spreads across the planet, and the world falls into chaos and despair. And this trilogy, because The Passage is a trilogy, is the epic of going from point zero to really a rebuilding at the end of the third and final novel in the trilogy. So the one thing about The Passage that I like to share with people is I don't know what I was going through in my life when I first read this book, but let me just tell you, it scared me so bad. I mean, I had nightmares at one point for 2 weeks. So I got through half the book and I couldn't read anymore because for some reason it scared me. It's not a scary book. Finally, I got through the novel and it became one of my favorite novels of all time. What I will say about The Passage is the first 250 pages, really the first third of the novel, is probably some of my favorite writing, period. I don't want to live in that because the world is ending. I mean, it's just so great to relive it constantly by rereading it. So there are often times where I won't read the entire book. I will just read that first 250 pages or so. The main character is a little girl named Amy, and there's something very special about her. And she has a cast of friends along the way that really help her move towards the end of the trilogy. So highly recommend it. It's a great series. I think that you'll really enjoy it. Okay, so let's talk about book 2. This book I've actually written about on the blog, which is makes me proud because a lot of these books I'm really scared to write about because I love them so much. But this is one book that I couldn't help but write about, and it makes it actually really, really easy to write about because it's so rich and so vibrant, and there's so much that you can glean from and pull from. It's just a great piece of literature, and that is Annihilation by Jeff VanderMeer. I mean, if my number one book did not exist, this would totally be my number one. I know a lot of people disagree with me about this, but I have made the argument on my blog, and I'm going to make the argument here in this video, that this is a perfect novel as is. It's part of a trilogy, but even if the other two books didn't exist, I think standalone, it is just perfection. The amazing thing about the novel is that it works so well on this idea of the creepy, like that there's something watching you, something maybe naturally alien. So the book is all about this team of explorers who go into this region called Area X, which has had some event happen that has started kind of modifying the terrain somehow. And there's really not much I can say beyond that because really, I think one, we don't know, and then two, I don't want to give too much away. But the novel is written from the perspective of an unnamed character called the Biologist, and she is basically keeping this journal as they're all supposed to be doing, and she's kind of sharing what's happening, and it is just delicious. It's one thing that's so great about this novel is you can feel the fear of the characters, and I think that that is so important when a writer can make you, the reader, feel what the characters are feeling. Whether that's despair, whether that's fear, whether that's this kind of claustrophobia of being trapped. And Jeff VanderMeer does a really great job of doing that. He uses a lot of different language that helps him in that. For instance, he uses the term colonization, uses it kind of like the world's trying to colonize you or fear is trying to colonize you. And, that's a great metaphor. But using language like that also builds on this feeling of maybe it's not fear, maybe it's something else that's trying to colonize you. While the other two books in the series are awesome, I love them as much as I love Annihilation, but they were still really good. And I did want to share a passage from the book to kind of show you what a master Jeff VanderMeer is at writing. The ghost bird had found his ghost on an inexplicable pile of other ghosts. But rather than looking forward to reading that account, I felt as if I were stealing a private diary that had been locked by his death. A stupid feeling, I know. All he'd ever wanted for me was to open up to him, and as a result, he had always been there for the taking. Now, though, I would have to take him as I found him, and it would probably be forever. And I found the truth of that intolerable. Wow, I mean, it's just so good. And I mean, just that little piece of writing, I hope, and I probably didn't do it any justice, but it's so rich. And I mean, I love how small it is because it's just such a rich, sharp novel. It's so blunted by mystery and vagueness, and I think that that's the incredible part of it. I know that that's probably what's made some people turn off to it a little bit, is it really doesn't give you a lot of answers. It leaves you with a lot of questions and a desire to know more. And quite honestly, the other two books don't really answer it at all, any of the questions that come up here. And that's kind of what I love. I love that the novel leaves you with all of these questions because I think that's really what life leaves us with, right? So here we are at my number one book. And this one was very hard also because even in itself, it's part of a series. And there are 7, so that already gives it away of what series I'm talking about. But it was hard picking my favorite one. So I didn't pick the first book in the series to sit on this list. I actually picked my favorite, which is actually the last book, and that's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This is my all-time favorite book. Every time I've read it, I mean, I have just been this is just a great novel because it's the culmination of all 6 novels before it, and then every time I read the last page, I mean, I'm devastated. I'm absolutely devastated that my journey with Harry is over. But that's the beauty of books, right? Because the great thing is all I need to do is go back to the very first one and start over. And I'm actually getting ready to do that towards the end of this year, to read all 7 again. It'll be my 14th time through. One thing that I love about the series is that I actually grew up with Harry Potter, and I know a lot of people say that, and I'm glad to share that experience with so many people. So when I first started reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I was 11. By the time I got Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, I was 18. This has been with me through an important part of my life. One thing that I love about the Deathly Hallows is that it's not set at Hogwarts. Harry and his friends, the fit has hit the shan basically at this point. It's all come down to the wire. Harry is going to have to face Voldemort at some point, and here is his friend standing next to him, and they're like, we're going to help you through this. So I felt so impassioned by this because even though I was in school at the time, I was actually in my first semester of college when this book was released. I had moved away. I had left all of my friends, and it was so nice to have literature friends with me to really comfort me. And it was awesome to kind of see what the finale of the series really resulted in. I think the important part about this novel, and I think really about all the Harry Potter novels that we come to find, is that love and friendship are the real magic. It's the interesting thing of, once again, kind of what I said earlier in this video, we think about magic, and if you had magic, would you be all powerful? And not necessarily. I think that is what we see in Voldemort. He's an incredibly powerful wizard, but without love, without friendship, he's really powerless. One thing, of course, just to talk about the writing, J.K. Rowling is a goddess. She's perfect. There's nothing that she can't write that I don't love, period. Don't argue with me. I'm even a fan of The Casual Vacancy, so I know a lot of people hated it. I know a lot of people were devastated that it was not like, the next installment of Harry Potter, but I thought The Casual Vacancy was awesome. So, it really showed me that I love J.K. Rowling as a writer. Once again, I think that this novel, too, is really cool because you feel the pressure and you feel the panic in a lot of the characters. Like when Kingsley Shacklebolt sends his Patronus back to the wedding party and says, the ministry has fallen, they're coming. When one of the characters relays to Arthur Weasley about Voldemort, Arthur, he can fly. Because, okay, what the heck? He has gotten to such a level of power that, he's doing things that none of us can do. So to feel those kind of things, I felt the fear. I felt the fear as well as I was reading through them. Like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? This is just the most, this is the greatest book series to me of all time. It trumps everything that I've ever read. Anytime I find myself kind of stuck in a rut of I don't want to read anything, or I just feel lost as a reader, because that definitely happens, I am never afraid to pick up Harry Potter. All I need to know, though, is it's going to be an investment of time, because once I start Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I'm going to be making it all the way to Deathly Hallows in a short period of time. That's my top 5 books, and I hope you really enjoyed this list. What I would like to know, though, is what are your favorite books? You can share your top 5, top 10, maybe just top 1 book of your favorite book of all time in the comments below. I'd also appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. I am going to be adding more videos about books, maybe other things along the way, and I hope to see you soon.